Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Today's episode of Success Insight is another addition to our Outdoor Adventure Series. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Barbara Ann Mojica and her husband, Victor Mojica. Now, Barbara Ann is the creator and author of the award-winning Little Miss History book series. Little Miss History is a whimsical character Barbara uses to narrate her book series. And within the series, Barbara hopes to educate, entertain, and inspire children to learn about historical people and places. And the design and illustrations for the book series were produced by the very talented Victor Mojica. Barbara Ann and Victor joined us in 2020 when we first were introduced to Little Miss History, and again in March for the launch of our Outdoor Adventure Series when we chatted about Little Miss History travels to SEQUOIA National Park, which is now on my bucket list because it's only about 4 hours away. I have to drive through Death Valley to get there, by the way, or go a long way around. Victor and Barbara Ann joined us again in May to chat about Little Miss History travels to Mount Rushmore. And so in today's episode, we're going to chat about another book for the Outdoor Adventure Series, Little Miss History travels to Tombstone, Arizona. Barbara Ann and Victor, welcome back to Success Insight and the Outdoor Adventure Series.
Great to be back with you again.
Thanks for having us, Howard.
Fantastic. I've said this once before. I feel like we are family now since we are just, every couple of months we get on, we talk, we see what's up. And I actually really want to thank you. I'm very grateful that, for one, Little Miss History and your openness to join us not only on the first podcast, but the subsequent episodes where we can explore the great outdoors. And your books are a perfect example of getting out and exploring. And I'm very grateful that the two of you are willing to get up early. It's early for me, 9 a.m. in Las Vegas. It's late morning back out east, but thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about Little Miss History travels to Tombstone, Arizona. I was looking on the map. That's not an easy place to get to.
No, a bit out of the way.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of the way.
How did Little Miss History and travels to Tombstone, Arizona, how did that come about?
Well, we had taken a trip to visit family, went to visit my brother, his wife, and family out in California. And my brother also loves history. So we decided to take a trip to Tombstone, and he hadn't been to that part of Arizona. So we all got in the car together and took a trip. So it was quite a trip. We did it.
I don't remember how long it took.
It took about more than 6 hours, and that plus stopping. And so it was the whole day's journey. And then we stayed overnight outside of Tombstone. And the next day we ventured into Tombstone, and we could have spent even more time there. I mean, there is really a lot to see. It looks like this tiny little place, but there is so much there to
We didn't realize we could actually go into the old silver mines there. We missed that.
But that is something that we can talk about, that you people can explore. You can see it so many different ways. The obvious way is to just walk down the restored main street, East Allen Street. It has been restored to look pretty much like it was, and they have actors who represent characters that would have been there. They have a Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and the other Earp brothers, Virgil and Morgan, walk up and down the streets.
That would be fun.
That in the book.
Really, that would be fun. I would want to get dressed up and have my Winchester, or actually my Colt 45. Winchester was the rifle, but I would love to have had that Colt 45.
Then there are actors who recreate life in the saloons. So you can go into a saloon and sit there and watch a recreation of actors walking in, conversing with each other, a shootout, of course, playing cards, drinking whiskey, the whole, it's about a 20-minute skit, but it gives you a very good flavor of what it would have been like.
Very cool. Now, I love, in the book are the Little Miss History, who's this very iconic little character. And you also intersperse her in the foreground, and in the background are the real pictures of, Tombstone, or as it was. And when you went out to visit your brother and you made this trek, and again, I'm thinking this is not an easy place to get to. I think I would have to go visit my friends in Tucson, because that's, I think, maybe one of the closest big cities, so to speak, going towards Tombstone. But go visit them and say, okay, I'm going to be away for a couple of days and just drive down. How had you thought about Tombstone as the backdrop for the Little Miss History series, or had you just decided, let's go visit it, and it's like you had this aha moment, let's do Little Miss History travels to Tombstone, Arizona?
No, it was intentional. We always show in each book what Little Miss History's next stop is going to be.
Ah, okay.
So we announced that she was going to Tombstone.
Oh, very good.
And then when we went to California, we did it.
Yeah, my brother's always we're thinking of ideas, he's thinking of ideas. So we're how about we'll go here this time, So we always hit one or more spots that it will become books in the future. We've gone to Death Valley together. And my newest book, which is it's just available online today, The Battleship Iowa. We went there together. That's outside of LA in San Pedro Harbor. So yeah, we always plan something when we're out there. So I always do something on the West Coast when we're out there.
Well, I'll tell you what, next time you're out on the West Coast for another book, I'm going to be showing up. I'm going to be your, I'm going to hold the camera. Back.
Howard Fox.
You could probably do early Las Vegas, because, go down, you said Fremont Street earlier, right. And that's like my backyard, mm-hmm. But not that I go out and visit there a lot. It's, I would rather go out to the desert. Now, when you wrote the book, again, you've got the history, and frankly, that was all I knew about Tombstone was, the shootout at OK Corral, the Arab stock holiday.
Didn't really happen there, but
yeah.
Yeah, so did we. That's why we missed going to the silver mines, because we didn't know that part of the history.
So I would imagine then Tombstone came about because of the silver mines, I would imagine.
Exactly. Right. There were prospectors, drifters. Ed Shiflin was an Army scout, and he dreamed of course, becoming rich, finding silver. So he prospected on the Native American lands. And his friends joked around with him that the only thing he was going to find was his own tombstone. And that's what he decided to name the mine. When he did strike about a 50-foot vein of silver, he named his first mine Tombstone. That didn't last very long. It dried up a couple of months after he found it. He found another mine, and he called that one the Lucky Cuss mine, because that proved to be a lot more lucrative.
Okay.
But Shiflin was he was a drifter. He was a prospector. He wasn't a businessman. So even though he found silver, he spent time in Tombstone. He set up the Opera House. And it was called Ed Shiflin's Opera Hall. And he was influential in some of the early businesses, but he didn't spend a lot of time there. He liked to roam and drift. There were other people that did a lot of prospecting that were more closely tied to the town. John Slaughter, he was an early sheriff. He was elected sheriff of the county. Tombstone's in Cochise County. And he was sheriff of the county. And he was also an Army Scout at one point in his life. He spent a lot of time there. A lot of people that settled in Tombstone were from the old South. A lot of them were from Texas. It was a real mix. There were people from the East. There were people from the South. There were people that were drifting in from other parts of the West. And then you had the immigrants. So a lot of the Chinese immigrants, who some of which had built the railroad and worked on the railroad in the 60s, stayed out in the area. And you had a lot of Chinese immigrants, and plus the most famous of those is China Mary, who her real name was Sing Choi. But China Mary was a real force in the history of Tombstone. She owned the general store. She had several gambling saloons. She had a prostitution ring. And she was involved in the opium trade.
Quite the entrepreneur.
But she was also a humanitarian. She would help the immigrants and the poor. She would find work for them. Very beloved. And she's buried, of course, in Boot Hill Cemetery.
Wow.
With a lot of the other more notorious members of the community.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we close out the book with her gravesite.
Okay. Well, I know I definitely am going to want to make a trip down to Tombstone. So tell us about Little Miss history. She gets to Tombstone, and what is she visiting?
Well, we go down the main street, which I mentioned, East Allen Street. So that's been restored with shops and eateries. Like a fun place to visit is Big Nose Kate's Saloon, where you can get a flavor of what it would have been like to go into the saloon. They're dressed in the costumes of the era, and
they have a gunfight.
They have little shows. You can go to the Historama, which is next to the OK Corral, and there you find a movie narrated by Vincent Price, and he goes through the history of Tombstone, a bit of the gun battle, the fights in the streets, the gambling halls, a bit of the everyday life, and then
gallows.
They also have exhibits of the wanted posters, the memorabilia. Of course, there's a museum shop. There are other eateries. There are a couple of saloons along East Allen Street. You can see the Earp brothers walking up and down the street. If you go to the OK Corral, they do a recreation of the gunfight, which is a lot of fun, especially for kids. They love that. So you see where it really took place. So it didn't really take place in the old K Corral. It really took place in an empty lot on Fremont Street. And they have an exhibit there which shows you some of the old mining equipment, the horse and buggies that they used.
Or you could take a real stagecoach ride.
Yeah, through the town, you can take a stagecoach ride. That's also available.
Bumpy ride. Whoa.
No springs. But the museum is also great. So you could spend a couple of hours in the courthouse, that's what actually saved Tombstone, because Tombstone went from being like a blip on the map, not even a blip on the map, In 7 years, their population went from like 14 to like 1,400. During that period, it was a boom town. They had everything: bowling alleys, an ice cream parlor, churches, schools, banks, and of course the newspaper. The newspaper is still there. The newspaper is still publishing, and that another fascinating place to visit, because you can see the original hand press, the linotype, the tintypes. All of that equipment is still there. If you visit there, you can get a printout of the actual newspaper article that was written the day after the gunfight at the OK Corral. The paper was founded in 1880, so shortly before the gunfight. You can subscribe to it. It's still publishing, and they will send you, historical record pieces and so on. That's one thing that's fascinating. There are so many things to see. You go into the courthouse, you can see outside the courthouse is a reconstruction of the gallows where a lot of these outlaws were hung. Inside, they have a room set up like one of the gaming halls. They have exhibits of the mining equipment, the trolleys, the presses, the little candles that they actually used to go into the mines holding a little candle holder with the tiny little candle, no electronics, no flashlights, and the presses, the trolleys. It's just amazing. You could see a sheriff's office. You can see the courtroom and the courthouse, Wyatt Earp's razor, the wanted posters, some drawings of life as it was at that point in Tombstone, pictures of the cattle ranchers, the cattle, the farming equipment. There's just like so much to see there. And that's what actually saved Tombstone after the silver ran out and all of the fires, which there were 3 major fires. First one was started when somebody threw a cigar into a whiskey barrel, and that burned down 66 buildings.
Oh, wow.
The year after that, in 1882, there was a fire in the Chinese laundry, and that burned down about half the town. And then after that, there was a big fire in the mid-'80s. I think it was 1886. There was a fire in one of the pumping stations, and that wiped out more, a significant part of the town. So by the turn of the century, it was very small, almost non-existent. And there are still people, of course, who live in Tombstone today, not a large population. They live around the town. There are places you can actually, if you wanted to stay in Tombstone, which we didn't realize until we got there, there are a lot of small little motels and boarding houses, so you can actually stay overnight in Tombstone if you wanted to.
I would like doing that.
That would be nice. No, I would do that. Have a little room up over the bar.
Yeah.
There's a place called the Rose Tree Inn, which is right. It's behind the main drag, like on. I think it's on 5th Street. And that the people who own that now have been in the area for decades. It was a woman and her husband, Ethel Robertson, and her husband, James Macier, I think his name was. They had a boarding house, the Arcade Boarding House. And in the mid-'60s, their children, who still live in the area, children and grandchildren, decided that they were going to reopen it. So it's called the Rose Tree Inn now because supposedly the world's largest rose tree is planted in the backyard.
Oh, wow.
Rose tree. And they maintain it kind of as a museum too. So they have historical photographs and memoirs there. That would be an interesting place to stay. And something else opened after we visited. This is new. There's a museum there for Audie Murphy, the famous World War II actor and war hero.
Sure.
And the owner of that museum, William Gray,
just opened up, right?
It just opened up. Supposedly, he had a dream in 2020. His mother came to him in a dream and told him to open up this museum for Audie Murphy. So he had connections with the Audie Murphy family, and they kept all of his memorabilia. They have his guns, his uniforms, a lot of his memoirs, photos,
awards,
and they donated it to him. So this museum now, I believe he lives there and he runs the museum downstairs, has all kinds of coins, uniforms, memorabilia, autographs. So someone who is a military history buff would definitely find that, interesting stuff.
It really just sounds like such a fascinating place. And I'll tell you, it's definitely next to SEQUOIA National Park is on my list. I mean, just go down there for a couple of days, explore. I mean, it's just me, but I can imagine if you have a family, young kids, I mean, there's just a lot to do and see there. So,
Wyatt Earp actually lived there when he was a marshal, and they have his house where you could visit his house.
Yeah, that's on the outskirts of the town too. And of course, you have to go to Boot Hill Cemetery to see the famous Boot Hill Cemetery.
They died with their boots on.
Okay, so that's where Boot Hill Cemetery is.
It was called Boot Hill Cemetery, right?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. It's funny, when I got to Nevada last year, Labor Day weekend, I drove up to Capitol Reef National Park, and on the way was the childhood home of Butch Cassidy. And so I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid fame. And but I can imagine going to Tombstone. I mean, I love old cemeteries. There's just something about them. But going to the Boot Hill Cemetery and seeing the home of Wyatt Earp, I mean, that's what we grew up with. I mean, those Westerns and those kinds of stories. And well, I would have to say, it sounds like Little Miss History had a lot of fun there.
Oh, she sure did.
An interesting thing that we learned when we went down there, Wyatt Earp lived to a ripe old age.
Yeah.
And he was a consultant in the early cowboy movies. And John Wayne knew him personally.
Oh, wow.
And tried to imitate how Wyatt Earp behaved, and how he carried himself. And John Wayne in his early movies tried to replicate that. And they used to talk on the set. He used to talk with Wyatt Earp on the set. And Wyatt Earp would be sitting in one of those director's chairs while they were shooting the movies.
That would be a picture I would love to see. Yeah. I'm sure there's a photograph somewhere of that, but I can imagine. I mean, there was I don't know if you remember it wasn't mainstream TV. It was on one of the cable networks, but it was a television show called Justified.
I remember that.
And Timothy Oliphant was a sheriff, federal marshal, and it took place in Harlan, Kentucky, and but he has, if you've ever seen Timothy Oliphant, he has a swagger about him, and he's very capable with his sidearm as well. And there's always he's always killing somebody. But one of the last scenes in the series was a shootout with a bad guy who fancied himself, the modern day outlaw, and with a six shooter. But I can imagine somebody like John Wayne, who be this big iconic character, and his walk and how he holds his gun on
White
his
Earp
hip
was his
and
buddy.
the holster. I'll that I'm gonna have to do some Google searching on that one. I'll bet you there's got to be a photograph out there somewhere. So
You have them together? Yeah.
so I really appreciate you both coming on, chatting about Little Miss history again. Again, Tombstone just sounds like such an amazing place. So I'm going to have to let my friends know I'm going to be coming down to visit and just, go on for another day or two excursion down to visit Tombstone and especially in maybe in the heat of the summer, probably not the best place because it's probably pretty darn hot down there.
We went at the end of
hot.
November.
It was hot.
And it was still fairly warm,
Very good. Very good. So now, Barbara, you said your next Little Miss History book in the series is coming out. Little Miss History Visits the Iowa.
It's available now.
Available now. Fantastic. Congratulations. And I would imagine there's a couple more Little Miss History books in you because I know Victor likes to drop those nice pictures. And so what's in store for us? Is it something you'd like to share?
She's going to Monticello.
Monticello.
Home of Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
That's going to be a trip, though.
I knew that, Victor. I knew that. I know my history.
That's going to be a trip.
Okay. Sounds like a fascinating one. Now, do you fly or do you drive when you go to some of these places?
Mostly drive.
Okay.
The ones in California.
The ones on the West Coast, we fly to California and then drive from there. But usually on the East Coast ones, we drive. Like we did Independence Hall, we drove there.
Everything on the East Coast, we drive to.
Okay, it's so much more accessible and consolidated travel wise. So not a bad.
We're thinking of doing Fort Sumter. Where the Civil War started.
Oh yeah, that's where it started.
We're thinking of going down there.
Okay.
Also.
Very good. Very good. Well, assuming I am still out west, because you never know, when you get out west, do let me know, and love to cross paths with you. And just again, this is just
that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's just a wonderful way to learn more about the history out here, and having the consummate historian and graphic artist, and lots of fun. I mean, it's funny because when I went to Joshua Tree a couple of weeks ago, there are sections of the old Route 66.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been kind of a fantasy, or I don't know, bucket list, whatever, driving from Chicago, because that's where Route 66 started, and drive, and I have to listen to Nat King Cole all the way. But
you can drive from there to California.
That's how I got there. Yeah.
Oh, shoot, you can.
I didn't know. On Route 66, huh?
Well, you can for a good portion of it. I mean, there's some parts that are no longer exist, so you have some detours. But it's interesting because there's the Mojave Desert Association, but they're always bringing up these maps of these old, mining towns. Lots of, as you talk about the silver mine in Tombstone, all these old towns that just sprung up, got busy, and then all of a sudden, the ore dried up, the minerals dried up, and the town just did a rapid decline. But a lot of them are on the old Route 66, and so you can drive through. I would have make sure I had extra tires on my, in the car. I wanted lots of water, some food, but yeah, you can. And there's some old places that are still there. There's a motel right on Route 66 that's still open. Unfortunately, the cafe was closed, but what are you going to do? But yeah, that's what I love about the country. There's just so much to see and learn, and there's some fascinating places, and it's nice, like with your love of history and writing and Little Miss history, bringing these places that we read about in school, bringing them to life. And so just a wonderful series, and really very grateful that we have crossed paths and we get to continue the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Howard.
My pleasure. And Monticello, Iowa, very interesting. We'll have to figure out another way to get an outdoor adventure series out of you, but we got time.
Yeah.
So thanks again. Enjoy your summer, and look again. Congratulations on Little Miss History travels to the Iowa, and be healthy and have those fantastic adventures together.
Yeah, wishing you the same.
Yeah, you take care of yourself.
All right. Okay, folks, we have just been chatting with Barbara Ann Mojica. She is the inspiration, the creative written part of the Little Miss History book series. Her husband, Victor Mojica, provides the wonderful illustrations. And today we've just been chatting about Little Miss History travels to Tombstone, Arizona for our outdoor adventure series. So if you haven't figured it out already, you need to go visit Tombstone. If you're going to plan a trip out west, sounds like a fascinating place. So I'm going to have to let my Tucson friends know I'm going to be coming for a visit, and I'm going to do a couple day trips on the way. But, do check out the Little Miss History book series. And of course, I'm remiss, you can find Barbara Ann's books and Little Miss History book series on her website. Learn all about her and her work, littlemisshistory.com. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. They've got a YouTube video. And of course, Victor has his website as well. We'll put the backlinks to it so you can see more about his work and his very talented graphics, and just it's kind of, what I love is there's a husband and wife, they're just working together. We didn't get into anything about the disagreements, but that's, we don't want, keep this all family friendly. So, but folks, if you love this episode, you enjoyed it, do check us out on successinsightpodcast.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, our Success Insight Podcast pages. We're on all of the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, especially Spotify, where we actually have our playlists located. So you can find all of our episodes with Barbara on Spotify, but specifically on the Outdoor Adventure playlist. And we'll have links back to that as well. And you can find us as well on YouTube. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we will see you on another episode of Success Insight Podcast and the Outdoor Adventure Series. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.